All right, so we talked a little bit about different kinds of lists: house lists, merged database lists, response lists, and compiled lists. Let's talk a little bit about general list selection. So you have identified a number of lists that you might want to consider using. How do you make that final decision to actually use one of those lists? Well, first, it's important to understand how the lists were developed, and then you can figure out on how to select them, right? So self-generated lists are lists that you have generated yourself from promotion, warranty cards, registration programs. Could have been people who were referred to you. Sometimes it's even you have purchased another company, and when you bought that company, they had a list of customers or a database of customers, and you inherited a database from another company. External sources are other people's databases, other house lists, that is, compiled by an outside company or compiled by a list broker. So there are all kinds of different sorts of lists. All right, so identifying prospects with the highest likelihood of purchasing your products is what this is all about. The key in purchasing an external list is to identify those lists that have the highest likelihood of responding to your organization's offers. Remember, this goes back to the basic 3 principles of good database marketing: the offer, the message, and the list. The basic idea of list selection is identifying those characteristics that are the best discriminators or predictors of purchases versus non-purchasers in the future. So a large number of list management companies will perform this function for you, but there is a benefit of becoming a list manager yourself so that you don't end up with a non-optimal list. This takes a large amount of modeling work to make this work correctly, but it also takes some insights and some anecdotes and others, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a different lecture. Once this is accomplished, the organization needs to rent lists that matches the characteristics that they want. In many cases, a direct match of using one of these sources is possible, but in other cases, a stretch is necessary. So perhaps instead of getting a list of golfers, you might end up with a list of Golf Magazine subscribers. Now, the reach here is that, well, not everybody who subscribes to Golf Magazine is necessarily a golfer, but certainly a very, very large percentage is. Lists. There are 40,000 lists of consumers and businesses available for rent. Using a list broker, you might pay between $50 to $250 per thousand names for a single use. Response lists and compile lists. We talked about these before. Response lists always work better because more than half of the U.S. households never buy anything by mail or even online. For a large mailing list of 2 million names, you might rent 200 different lists to get to those 2 million names. And you might rent 3 million names because you'll find that there are lots of duplicates over those 2 lists. Compiled lists. All right, so compiled lists, and we're going to talk mostly now about how you make a selection of some sort of a compiled or response list. This is the only way to reach 240 million people, 100 million households, and thousands of groups. Why use compiled data? Well, it's the largest universe. There are typically extensive lifestyle selections associated with them, and it's the least expensive of lists. What's the big disadvantage? Well, if you pick the wrong lists, really low response rates. Major list compilers is where it all starts. Polk likes to use auto registrations and lifestyle selectors. Metro Mail uses the white pages court records. Donnelly uses the white pages catalog information, etc. Experian uses credit card data, auto registration, court documents, county assessor documents. And TransUnion uses credit card data, but they all use a variety of data, and they all go about compiling their lists in slightly different ways, so you get slightly different data in that list. All right, so compiled lists, one of the things that you will get in compiled lists is age data. Okay, and so age data tells you how, puts people, so if you're interested in demographic database marketing or lists that are based on age, you want to find out how they got that age data. Some get it from driver's license, some get it from birth records, some get it from photographers. When your family has their photos taken, the person there always writes down everybody's age. And then, of course, they turn out that they rent that data to, and they supply certain compilers with that data. But it's also on a number of other areas. The income is another interesting piece of data that is probably a little harder to get than you might think. This data is very often imputed. So we could ask you what your income is, and you probably wouldn't give me the right number, and I probably wouldn't give you the right number for me. But typically they don't ask people how much they make. They impute that data from census data, homeowner data, auto registration data, age, etc. So they estimate your income. I remember many years ago I was on a panel, and one of the people on the panel with me was a young gentleman who really seemed to be a really smart young man that had recently gotten into direct marketing. And one of the other people on the list on the panel was a guy by the name of Josh Bickert, who started a company called NDL, and we'll talk about NDL in a different lecture. But it was one of the very original, largest data warehouses for consumer data. And so he built some of the first compiled lists in the industry. And we were sitting there, and the young man said, he made the comment. He said, the good thing about list management today is that there is a lot less missing data. Virtually we have data on everybody's age, income, education, et cetera, et cetera. And I was sitting there, and I didn't say anything, but Josh Bickert, who was really, one of the true experts in the field, looked at the young man, then he looked at me, and then he looked at the people who were watching the panel, and he said, "Of course that's not right." He said the reason that age data and income data is always filled in now is because it is no longer directly gotten from things like driver's licenses or birth records or any other way, or from census data. It in fact is imputed. We estimate your age and we estimate your income. So yes, for everybody in our database, we have that data. But you need to understand that data is not as accurate as it used to be, because in many cases we're imputing it, which in reality is estimating it from other sources, which is making a best guess estimate. So basically, what do we know from this information from the sort of the demographic data? Well, so typically what you'll get in these lists is name, age, marital status, purchase price and date of your house, mortgage information, what kind of autos you own, estimated income, number of children, ages of your children, address, phone number. We might have whether or not you rent or own. We might have a plethora of demographic information. But then we might also add some lifestyle stuff, like sports participation, TV viewing habits, education, interests, product ownership, pets, hobbies, etc. I guess I would call education another one of the demographics, but you get the idea that these lists will have more than simple demographics associated with them. Some list selection guidelines. All right, so you want to carefully read the description of the list, specifically who is on it. And then you want to try to assess the quality of the list. And the way you assess the quality of the list is you find out what are the sources that the list compiler used to get this data. Now this takes a little bit of time and effort, but and of course the list compiler will always put this in the best possible light. But this is a little bit like reading resumes, and that is you have to be able to sort of read between the lines. You're also going to want to know what the quantities available are. Then you want to know what the cost per thousand is going to be. You want to know if they've made previous responses to mailers. you want to know if there's a hot list option, and you want to know what selections are available and how frequently they update the list. Okay. So now we're going to go through a couple of different lists, okay? And these are lists that these are what we call sample list rate cards. And so what we'll do is we'll go in here and we will, so what we'll do is we'll see how much it will cost for us to get the list that we want, but we also want to look at some of the other information so that you can get a feeling for how to evaluate lists. Now you'll notice that this is from the Millard Group Consumer Database. These are golf enthusiasts. These are people who have expressed an interest in the purchase of golf-oriented books, magazines, or products. It's sourced 100% from InfoUSA's own premier consumer database. And it is the most comprehensive consumer base on the market. This file combines multiple sources for the highest degree of accuracy and maximum coverage. And so it gives a little bit of a feeling for where this data came from, okay? And then let's take a look at some of the other things we want to know. Well, we want to know what the counts are. And so you'll notice that there are 1.9 million people who are interested in golf. 384,000 golf magazine subscription and buyers, and then 205,000 people who are golf catalog buyers, which is sort of a response list, which is probably a good thing to look at, okay? So let's assume that we wanted 40,000 names, and so we were going to start by taking golf magazine subscribers, okay? And so you'll notice that the golf magazine subscribers are $75 per M, which is what? 1,000. So that is 7.5 cents per name. But we're going to want not everybody who subscribes to Golf Magazine, but we're going to want certain age groups. Okay? And so an age group might cost us, it will cost us $8 per 1,000. And so when we look at ages, so if we decide that we're going to break out and we only want one age group, or we want to break this down by age, that's going to cost us $8 more per 1,000, or an additional 0.8 cents. If we want to break it down by gender, that's an additional $5 per 1,000. And then if we want to break it down by household income, that's an additional $10 per 1,000. So when we get done here, we are going to have the $75 per 1,000 plus 8 for the age, 5 for the gender, that's 13, and 10 for the household income, that's 23. And so at the end of the day, we will have $98 per 1,000, or 98 cents a piece. All right, let's try another one. This is one of my favorite lists. This is what we affectionately refer to as the gigolo list. These are wealthy widows who donate money. So these are, these are widows, and of course you can read what it is. These are wealthy widows who have to adjust to a new lifestyle without their partner, but they have the income to reinvent themselves. They're looking for new investments, buying art, moving to new homes, redecorating, making new friends, traveling. These women wrote the checks for charitable donations before their spouse died and have continued to make these contributions at a larger amount. All right, and so that's the sort of people that we have here. You'll notice that there are people who have made a donation in the last 12 months, 919,000 of these widows. People who have made at least 2 donations, there's 861,000 of them. These are compiled at the state and federal level records, and so these will be done by death certificates, things like that. The demographic selects are $5 a piece, and so are age and income. Demographic selects, geographic selects are $10 each. And so if we wanted income, and only from particular states and multiple donors, and we wanted to use pressure sensitive labels. That is, they'll send us the actual labels that we can stick right on the envelopes. That's an additional $10 per thousand. So our total names would be 20,000 names at $120 per thousand, or $2,400 overall, or 12 cents per name. So in conclusion, do your homework, test lists against each other, always work to continuously improve your response rates by finding better lists, and understand that there's a learning curve associated with managing lists. So sometimes you're going to make some mistakes. Learn from those mistakes, and you'll always work to continuously improve your database marketing.